The sleek black Mercedes-Benz purred through the congested streets of Lagos, its tinted windows reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. Inside, Olumide Bankole sat in the back seat, his arm draped possessively around his fiancée, Zainab, whose laughter tinkled like expensive champagne glasses. His driver navigated through the traffic with practiced ease, weaving between Danfo buses and Okada riders. Then he saw her. On the dusty roadside, bent nearly double under the weight of a massive bundle of firewood strapped to her back, was an elderly woman. Her wrapper was faded and torn at the edges, her headscarf askew, revealing gray hair that caught the dying light. She stumbled slightly, and Olumide's heart lurched with recognition. His mother. Mama Olumide, the woman who had sold her jewelry to pay his school fees, who had hawked groundnuts in the scorching sun so he could attend university, who had slept on a mat so he could have the only mattress in their one-room apartment. "Driver, speed up," Olumide said sharply, his voice tight. Zainab turned to look out the window, her perfectly manicured eyebrows rising. "Is that woman okay? She looks like she's about to collapse. Should we?" "Just someone from the neighborhood," Olumide interrupted, his jaw clenched. "Driver, I said speed up." As the car accelerated past, Mama Olumide looked up. Their eyes met for a split second through the tinted glass. Olumide saw the recognition dawn in her face, saw her mouth form his name, saw her weathered hand rise in a tentative wave. Then they were past her, leaving only dust in their wake. Welcome to Stories by AJIBS. Thank you so much for your incredible support and for making this channel a home for powerful African stories. Before we continue with today's heart-wrenching tale, please drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Brooklyn, Kingston, London? We love hearing from our global family. Now, let's dive back into this emotional journey. Zainab shifted in her seat, her Hermes bag rustling against the leather. "You've been quiet since we passed that woman. Everything okay, baby?" Olumide forced a smile, the same charming grin that had won him contracts worth millions. "Perfect. Just thinking about the wedding preparations. Your father wants to meet again next week." "Oh, I know. Daddy is so excited. He keeps telling everyone his daughter is marrying the richest young businessman in Lagos." Zainab kissed his cheek, leaving a glossy imprint. "I still can't believe how far you've come, from nothing to everything. You're like a miracle, Olumide." From nothing? The words stung more than they should have. Olumide looked out the window, but all he could see was his mother's face, the way her eyes had widened with hope before confusion clouded them. "My parents can't wait to meet your family," Zainab continued, scrolling through her phone. "Mummy wants to do the traditional wine-carrying ceremony big. She's thinking maybe 500 guests. She wants to invite all the society women. Oh, and she keeps asking about your mother. When do we get to meet her?" Olumide's throat tightened. "She's been traveling for a while now, business." It wasn't entirely a lie. His mother did travel, from one menial job to another, from one person's house, where she worked as a maid, to another, where she washed clothes by hand because she couldn't afford a washing machine. The truth was simpler and more shameful. Olumide had moved his mother out of his luxury apartment in Ikoyi 6 months ago. He'd rented her a small room in Mushin, given her a monthly allowance that barely covered her needs, and told her to stay away from his business circles. When his company started making headlines, when governors and senators started inviting him to their tables, when he got engaged to Zainab Okonkwo, daughter of one of Nigeria's oil magnates, he'd made his choice. Poverty, he decided, wasn't a good look for a billionaire. His phone buzzed. A message from his younger brother, Tund. "Brother, Mama tried to call you again. She said she needs to talk to you about something urgent. She's not been well. Please call her back." Olumide deleted the message without responding. He'd deal with Tund later. His brother didn't understand the game, didn't understand that in Lagos, your past could sink you faster than a bad investment. The car pulled up to Zainab's family mansion in Victoria Island. The gates swung open automatically, revealing a sprawling compound with manicured lawns and a fountain that probably cost more than his mother's entire life savings. "Come in for a bit?" Zainab asked, her hand on his thigh. Daddy wants to discuss the wedding budget. He's thinking a destination wedding in Dubai might be nice. I have a meeting, Olumide lied, checking his Rolex. Big investors from South Africa, can't miss it. You work too hard. She pouted but kissed him goodbye. Call me later. As his car pulled away from the mansion, Olumide's phone rang. Tund again. He let it ring out. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, he answered. What is it, Tund? I'm busy. Mama collapsed. Tund's voice was shaking. She collapsed carrying firewood. The neighbors brought her to the general hospital. She's asking for you. Brother, please, she needs you. The general hospital. The words conjured images of crowded wards, peeling paint, overwhelmed doctors. Places where people like Zainab Okonkwo would never set foot. I'll send money, Olumide said, his voice flat. Handle it. She doesn't need money right now, she needs her son. Tund's voice cracked. What happened to you? When did you become this person? I became successful. That's what happened. And success requires sacrifices. Sacrifices? Brother, she sacrificed everything for you. And now you can't even visit her in the hospital. I said I'll send money. That's all I can do right now. Olumide hung up before Tund could respond. He leaned back in the leather seat, closing his eyes. But all he could see was his mother's face on that roadside, the way recognition had turned to hurt when his car sped past. His phone buzzed with a bank alert. Incoming payment, $50 million. Another successful deal closed. He should feel triumphant, but instead he felt hollow. Sir, where to? His driver asked. Olumide thought about the hospital, about his mother lying in some metal bed, about Tund sitting beside her, probably holding her hand the way Olumide used to when he was young, and she was all he had in the world. Take me home, he said finally. The penthouse. As the car navigated back through Lagos traffic, Olumide saw them everywhere, women like his mother. Women bent under the weight of their burdens, women hawking in traffic, women who had given everything to sons who grew up and forgot where they came from. He told himself he was different. He told himself he'd earned his escape from poverty. He told himself that his mother would understand, eventually, why he needed distance from his past. But the image of her face through the car window, the moment she recognized him and he looked away, would haunt him for the rest of the night. What he didn't know was that his mother hadn't just collapsed from exhaustion. She'd collapsed from heartbreak. And in the general hospital, as Tund held her hand and wiped her tears, Mama Olumide made a decision that would change everything. What do you think Mama Olumide is planning? Will Olumide regret turning his back on his mother? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story is touching your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What would you do if your child denied you after everything you sacrificed? Comment below. The general hospital's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the crowded emergency ward. Mama Olumide lay on a narrow bed, an IV drip attached to her arm, surrounded by the sounds of crying children, groaning patients, and exhausted nurses rushing between beds. The smell of antiseptic mixed with sweat and desperation hung heavy in the air. Tund sat beside her, his hand wrapped around hers. At 23, he was 7 years younger than Olumide, still struggling through his final year at the University of Lagos. He worked as a graphics designer on the side, making just enough to help with Mama's rent and his own expenses. Looking at his mother's face, pale and drawn with exhaustion and something deeper, something that looked like profound sadness, he felt a rage building in his chest. He's not coming, is he? Mama Olumide's voice was barely a whisper. Mama, rest. Don't think about him right now. My own son. A tear slid down her weathered cheek. I saw him, Tund. I saw him in that big car with that woman. He looked right at me and told his driver to speed away. Like I was nothing. Like I was trash on the roadside. Tund's jaw clenched. He wanted to defend his brother, wanted to find excuses, but he couldn't. Not anymore. Over the past 6 months, he'd watched Olumide transform from the brother who used to send money home every week, who called Mama every morning, who promised to build her a house someday, into a stranger who barely returned calls and sent just enough money to keep them quiet. The doctor said you have high blood pressure, Mama, and you're severely dehydrated and malnourished. Why didn't you tell me things were this bad? Mama Olumide turned her face away. The money Olumide sends, it's not enough anymore. Rent keeps going up. Food prices keep rising. I took the firewood job because a woman in the market said she'd pay $2,000 per load. I thought I could manage. $2,000. Tund felt sick. Mama, you know Olumide just closed a deal worth $50 million today. I saw it in the business news. His company is worth billions now, and you're killing yourself for 2,000. Maybe he's ashamed of me, Mama said softly. Maybe he looks at me and sees everything he's trying to forget. The poverty, the suffering, the one-room apartment where we all slept on the floor. No, Mama, don't say that, don't ever say that. But even as Tund protested, he knew there was truth in her words. He'd seen how Olumide had changed, how he'd started speaking differently, dressing differently, moving in circles where people like them, people who still struggled, who still remembered hunger, didn't exist. A nurse approached, holding a clipboard. Mrs. Bankole, the doctor wants to admit you for observation. At least 3 days. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, and we need to run more tests. How much will it cost? Mama asked, her voice trembling. The nurse named a figure that made Tund's stomach drop. Even with his savings, he couldn't cover it, not without help. I'll call Olumide again, Tund said, pulling out his phone. No, Mama's voice was suddenly firm. She struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. No more calling him, no more begging him. Mama, you need treatment. I said no, Tund. Her eyes flashed with a determination he hadn't seen in months. I have raised that boy with my own hands. I sold my wedding gold to pay his school fees. I washed rich people's clothes until my hands bled so he could have textbooks. I went hungry so he could eat meat on Sundays. And today he saw me suffering on the road and drove past like I was a stranger. Mama, please. Do you know what hurts the most? Tears streamed freely now. Not that he's ashamed of me, not that he wants to forget where he came from. What hurts is that he's forgotten what I taught him. I taught him that family is everything. I taught him that money without character is worthless. I taught him that you never turn your back on the people who sacrificed for you. Tund had never seen his mother like this, not broken, but burning with quiet fury. I'm done crying, Mama said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I'm done begging. I'm done being invisible. Tund, help me discharge myself. What? No. Mama, you need medical care. Then you'll take me to a cheaper clinic, or I'll rest at home. But I won't stay here begging for help from a son who has forgotten I exist. She pulled the IV from her arm before Tund could stop her, ignoring the nurse's protests. Mrs. Bankole, you can't just... Watch me. As Mama slowly got to her feet, steadying herself against the bed frame, Tund saw something in her eyes that both frightened and impressed him. His mother had always been gentle, accommodating, the type to suffer in silence rather than cause trouble. But something had broken inside her today, or maybe something had finally awakened. What are you going to do? Tund asked quietly as he helped her toward the exit. Mama Olumide straightened her wrapper, adjusted her headscarf, and looked at her younger son with eyes that held a new resolve. I'm going to remind my son who he is, and if he's truly forgotten, then I'm going to remind the world who raised him. This Lagos, these society people he's trying to impress, they need to know that the billionaire Olumide Bankole was once a poor boy whose mother carried him on her back while hawking groundnuts in traffic. Mama, what does that mean? She didn't answer immediately. They walked out of the hospital into the warm Lagos night, the streets still bustling with evening traders and commuters rushing home. Somewhere in this same city, in a penthouse apartment worth hundreds of millions, her firstborn son was probably sipping expensive wine, planning his society wedding, living a life that had no room for the woman who made it all possible. It means, Mama finally said, her voice steady despite her weakness, that I carried him for 9 months in my womb, carried him on my back for years after that, and I'll be damned if I let him pretend I don't exist now that he can walk on his own. Tund hailed an Okada, helping his mother onto the back of the motorcycle. As they rode through Lagos traffic, weaving between cars that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. His mother had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts, who made excuses for Olumide's growing distance. But not anymore. When they reached the small room in Mushin that Olumide rented for her, barely large enough for a bed and a small cooking area, Mama immediately went to the corner where she kept her old metal box. Inside were the remnants of her past, faded photographs, old certificates, letters Olumide had written her from university promising to make her proud, to never forget her sacrifices. "Mama, you should rest." "Tomorrow," she said, pulling out a photograph of young Olumide at his university graduation, standing beside her, both of them beaming with pride. "Tomorrow, I'm going to Victoria Island, to the Okonkwo mansion." Tun's eyes widened. "Mama, no, you can't." "I can, and I will. If my son wants to marry into society, if he wants to become part of these big families, then his future in-laws should meet the woman who made him. They should know the full story, not just the version Olumide is selling them. This could destroy him, Mama. His engagement, his business reputation." Then he should have thought about that before he drove past his mother on the roadside like she was garbage. Her voice was cold now, harder than Tund had ever heard it. "I don't want to destroy him, Tund. I want to save him. Because right now, the man he's becoming, that's not my son. That's not the boy I raised. And if embarrassing him in front of his fancy fiancée and her family is what it takes to remind him of his humanity, then so be it." Tund looked at his mother, this woman who had endured so much, who had given so much, who had been taken for granted for so long, and realized she was serious. Tomorrow, she would walk into one of Lagos's most powerful families and tell them the truth about the man who wanted to marry their daughter. And Olumide had no idea what was coming. In his penthouse across the city, Olumide stood by his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Lagos skyline glittering with lights. His phone sat silent on the marble counter. No more calls from Tund, no messages from his mother. He told himself this was better, that the silence meant they'd finally understood he needed space from his past. He didn't know that the silence was actually the calm before a storm that would shake the very foundation of the life he'd built. The morning sun painted Victoria Island in shades of gold and amber as Mama Olumide stood before the towering gates of the Okonkwo mansion. She had woken before dawn, bathed with the half-bucket of water she'd fetched from the communal tap, and dressed in her best wrapper and blouse. The traditional attire she'd worn to Olumide's university graduation 7 years ago. The fabric was faded now, the colors not as vibrant as they once were, but she wore it with dignity. Tund stood beside her, nervous energy radiating from him. "Mama, it's not too late to turn back. We can find another way." "Ring the bell," Mama said firmly. The security guard who appeared at the gate looked them up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Yes, what do you want?" "I'm here to see Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo," Mama announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Tell them Olumide Bankole's mother is here." The guard's expression shifted from dismissive to confused. "Olumide's mother, wait here." He disappeared, speaking rapidly into his walkie-talkie. Minutes passed like hours. Mama could feel her blood pressure rising again, the dizziness from yesterday threatening to return, but she steadied herself against the gate. She hadn't come this far to collapse now. Finally, the gate swung open. "Madam said you should come in." They walked up the long driveway, past luxury cars that cost more than Mama had earned in her entire lifetime. The mansion loomed ahead, its white columns and expansive veranda speaking of generational wealth. The kind of wealth that came from oil wells and government contracts, not from sweat and sacrifice. Mrs. Okonkwo waited at the entrance, resplendent in an expensive lace bubu, her neck heavy with gold jewelry. Her expression was a careful mask of politeness, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. Behind her stood Zainab, looking confused and slightly annoyed in her silk pajamas. "Mrs. Bankole," Mrs. Okonkwo's voice was cultured, each word precisely enunciated. "What a..." Surprise, we weren't expecting you. Olumide said you were traveling. Did he? Mama smiled, but there was no warmth in it. My son says many things these days, most of them lies. Zainab stepped forward, her perfect eyebrows furrowed. I'm sorry, who? I'm your fiancé's mother, Mama said, looking directly at the young woman. The one he told you was traveling on business, the one he's apparently too ashamed to let you meet. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Mrs. Okonkwo's polite mask slipped slightly, revealing calculation beneath. Perhaps we should speak inside, away from prying eyes. She glanced at the security guard and house staff who were watching with undisguised interest. They were led to an opulent sitting room where the furniture probably cost more than Mama's yearly rent. Crystal chandeliers, imported rugs, artwork that screamed wealth. Mama sat on the edge of a velvet sofa, her worn wrapper a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding her. Can I offer you something to drink? Mrs. Okonkwo asked, still maintaining her hostess facade. Tea, coffee. Water is fine, Mama replied. I'm not here for your hospitality. I'm here to tell you the truth about the man who wants to marry your daughter. Zainab sank into a chair, her phone clutched in her hand. I don't understand. Olumide said his parents were. He said you were successful, that his father was a businessman. His father abandoned us when Olumide was 5 years old, Mama interrupted, her voice cutting through the pretense. Left me with 2 sons and nothing but debts. I raised those boys alone. I hawked groundnuts in traffic. I washed clothes by hand for rich families. I cleaned houses. I did everything a mother could do to make sure my sons had food, education, and a future. Mrs. Okonkwo's expression had shifted from polite interest to something harder. Mrs. Bankole, I'm sure you've made sacrifices, but why come here? Why now? Because yesterday, your future son-in-law saw me on the roadside, bent double under firewood I was carrying to earn 2,000, and he told his driver to speed past me. He looked me in the eye and pretended not to know me. Mama's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed forward. I collapsed after that. From exhaustion, from high blood pressure, from heartbreak. I ended up in the general hospital where I couldn't even afford treatment. And when my younger son called him, begged him to come, you know what Olumide said? The room was silent, except for the ticking of an expensive clock. He said he'd send money, that's all. Money, not his presence, not his concern, not even a phone call to check if his mother was alive or dead. Just money. Zainab's face had gone pale. That can't be right, Olumide is. He's generous, he's kind. To you, perhaps, Mama said, her eyes boring into the younger woman. To people who can help his image, his business, his social climbing. But to the woman who gave him life, who sacrificed everything so he could become the man you want to marry, to her, he's become a stranger. Mrs. Okonkwo stood abruptly, her composure cracking. What exactly do you want, Mrs. Bankole? Money? Is this some kind of... I don't want your money. Mama rose too, ignoring the dizziness. I want my son back. I want the boy I raised, the one who used to promise me the world, who used to say he'd build me a mansion someday, who used to call me every morning just to hear my voice. But that boy is gone, replaced by a man who's so desperate to fit into your world that he's willing to erase where he came from. Tund placed a gentle hand on his mother's arm, worried she might collapse again, but she shook him off. You want to know who Olumide Bankole really is? Mama continued, her voice rising with emotion. He's the boy who wore the same uniform for 3 years because I couldn't afford a new one. He's the child who studied by candlelight because we couldn't pay electricity bills. He's the young man who cried in my arms when his father left, and I promised him that poverty wouldn't define him, that he could be anything he wanted. And I kept that promise. I starved so he could eat. I walked so he could take transport. I wore rags so he could have decent clothes. Tears were streaming down Mama's face now, but her voice remained strong. And now, he drives past me in a car worth millions while I'm breaking my back for 2,000. That's who your daughter wants to marry. A man who forgets where he came from the moment it becomes inconvenient. Zainab was crying too, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. I need to call him. I need to. He won't answer. Tund spoke for the first time, his voice bitter. Not when he sees it's about his mother. He's very good at ignoring calls from his past. Mrs. Okonkwo had regained some of her composure, but her expression was troubled. Mrs. Bankole, I appreciate you coming here, truly. But marital matters, family matters, these are complex. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Mama said wearily, the fire draining out of her as exhaustion took over. Your future son-in-law is ashamed of his mother. That's the simple truth. And I thought you should know that before your daughter ties her life to a man who can so easily discard the woman who gave him everything. She turned to leave, Tund supporting her elbow, when Zainab's voice stopped them. Wait, the young woman stood, wiping her tears. Yesterday in the car, we passed a woman carrying firewood. Olumide told the driver to speed up. I asked if we should help, and he said it was just someone from the neighborhood. Her voice broke. That was you. Oh God, that was you, and I was sitting right there. Mama nodded slowly. Yes, that was me. And my son looked me in the eye and chose you over me. Chose his new life over the woman who gave him life. So now you know. Now you know what kind of man he really is. As Mama and Tund walked back down the long driveway, the sun now high and hot overhead, neither of them saw Mrs. Okonkwo pull out her phone, her expression grim. Get me Olumide Bankole, she said to whoever answered. Now, and tell him if he's not in my sitting room within the hour, the engagement is off. Back in the mansion, Zainab stood frozen, her phone in her hand, staring at her engagement ring, a 5-carat diamond that suddenly felt heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. The man she thought she knew, the man she'd agreed to spend her life with, had just been revealed as someone capable of profound cruelty toward the person who loved him most. Her phone buzzed, a message from Olumide. Good morning, my love. Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you. She looked at those words, love you, and wondered how someone who could deny his own mother could possibly know what love meant. In his office in Ikoyi, Olumide was in the middle of a video conference with investors from Dubai when his phone started ringing. Mrs. Okonkwo. He ignored it, focusing on the presentation. It rang again, and again. Then his secretary knocked urgently. Sir, Mrs. Okonkwo says it's an emergency. About the wedding. Olumide excused himself from the meeting, stepping into the hallway with a smile still plastered on his face. Good morning, Ma, is everything. Your mother was here. Mrs. Okonkwo's voice was ice. Your mother, who you said was traveling, who you've been hiding like some dirty secret, showed up at my gate this morning looking like she hadn't eaten in days. And she told us everything, Olumide, everything. The smile died on Olumide's face. The floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet. You have 1 hour to get here and explain yourself, Mrs. Okonkwo continued. 1 hour, or this engagement is finished. My daughter will not marry a man who treats his own mother like garbage. The line went dead. Olumide stood in the hallway, his heart pounding, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. His mother had done the one thing he'd feared most. She'd exposed him. And now, everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed his integrity for, was hanging by a thread. What will Olumide say to the Okonkwo family? Can he talk his way out of this? Should Zainab forgive him? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and subscribe for more emotional African stories. What would you do if you discovered your fiancé had been lying about his family? Comment your answer. Don't forget to turn on notifications. Next chapter is going to be explosive. Olumide sat in his Mercedes-Benz, parked a block away from the Okonkwo mansion, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, trying to gather the courage to walk through those gates, trying to construct a story that might salvage his crumbling future. But every lie he tried to formulate died on his tongue. His phone buzzed again. Zainab. Where are you? Mummy is furious. I'm confused and hurt. I need answers, Olumide, real answers. He closed his eyes, and all he could see was his mother's face through the car window yesterday. The moment she'd recognized him, the hope that had flared in her eyes before he'd looked away. The memory burned like acid in his chest. Finally, he started the engine and drove to the mansion. The security guard who'd always greeted him with respect now looked at him with something resembling contempt. Word had spread quickly. Mrs. Okonkwo waited in the sitting room, her husband beside her for the first time. Mr. Okonkwo was a tall man with silver hair and eyes that had seen through countless business deals and liars. Zainab sat across from them, her face puffy from crying, still in her pajamas. "Sit," Mrs. Okonkwo commanded, not offered. Olumide sat on the edge of the same sofa his mother had occupied hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Before you start constructing your defense," Mr. Okonkwo spoke for the first time, his voice deep and measured, "let me tell you what we know. Your mother came here this morning. She told us everything. How she raised you alone after your father abandoned you, how she worked menial jobs to put you through school, how you've systematically erased her from your life as you've climbed the social ladder. Is any of this untrue?" Olumide opened his mouth, but no words came. What could he say? Every word was true. "She also told us," Mr. Okonkwo continued, "that you saw her yesterday, struggling under firewood, and you drove past her. Zainab confirms this. She says she suggested helping the woman, and you told your driver to speed up." "Sir, I can explain." "Then explain." Mr. Okonkwo leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Explain to me how a man who claims to love my daughter, who claims to have values and integrity, can treat the woman who gave him life worse than a stranger on the street." The room fell silent. Olumide felt like he was suffocating. "I was ashamed," he finally whispered, the truth, raw and ugly, spilling out. "I was ashamed of where I came from, ashamed of the poverty, the suffering, the reminder of everything I used to be." Zainab made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "When I started making money," Olumide continued, his voice breaking, "when I started moving in different circles, meeting people like you, I thought my past would hold me back. I thought if people knew where I came from, they wouldn't take me seriously. They wouldn't do business with me. They wouldn't." He looked at Zainab. "They wouldn't let me marry their daughters." "So you erased her," Mrs. Okonkwo said coldly. "You took the woman who sacrificed everything for you and you erased her like she never existed." "I sent her money." "Money?" Mr. Okonkwo's voice rose for the first time. "You think money replaces a son's love, a son's presence? Let me tell you something, young man. I built my wealth from the ground up too. My father was a palm wine tapper. My mother sold fish in the market. And you know what I did when I made my first million? I built them a house. I brought them to live with me. I introduced them to everyone, governors, senators, presidents, and I told them all, these are my parents. These are the people who made me." The words hit Olumide like physical blows. "You want to know what real wealth is?" Mr. Okonkwo stood, towering over Olumide. "Real wealth is being able to honor where you came from while moving forward. Real wealth is having the courage to say, this is my mother and I'm proud of her. You don't have wealth, young man. You have money, and there's a difference." Zainab finally spoke, her voice small and hurt. "Why did you lie to me? About everything. Your parents, your background, all of it." Olumide turned to her, tears streaming down his face now. "Because I wanted to be worthy of you. I wanted to be the man I thought you deserved." "And you thought lying was the way to do that." She stood, pulling off her engagement ring. The 5-carat diamond caught the morning light. "The man I agreed to marry was honest, kind, and family-oriented. That's what you showed me. But that man doesn't exist, does he? He was just another lie." "Zainab, please." "Your mother came here this morning looking like she'd been through hell." Zainab's voice shook with emotion. "Do you know what she said? She said she didn't come here to destroy you. She came here to save you. Even after everything you've done to her, she's still trying to save you. That's real love, Olumide. That's what you threw away for this." She gestured at the mansion, at the wealth, at everything he'd thought mattered. Mrs. Okonkwo took the ring from Zainab's trembling hand. "I think you should leave now, Olumide, and don't come back until you've figured out who you really are and who you want to be." "Please," Olumide begged, looking between them desperately. "Give me a chance to make this right. I'll go to my mother. I'll apologize. You'll apologize because we're forcing you to." Mr. Okonkwo shook his head. "That's not remorse. That's damage control. Your mother deserves better than a son who only remembers she exists when his social standing is threatened. Olumide stood on shaking legs. Everything was falling apart. The engagement, his reputation, the life he'd built, all of it crumbling because he'd been too ashamed to acknowledge the woman who'd made it all possible. As he walked toward the door, Zainab called out, "Olumide." He turned, hope flaring briefly. "Your mother told me something before she left. She said she taught you that family is everything, that money without character is worthless. She said she taught you never to turn your back on the people who sacrificed for you." Zainab's eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Maybe you should think about why you forgot those lessons." The drive back to his penthouse passed in a blur. When Olumide finally stood in his luxury apartment, the marble floors, the designer furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos, it all felt empty, hollow. His phone rang, tunned. "She's back in the hospital," his brother said without preamble. "The confrontation this morning, the stress, the walk to Victoria Island and back in the heat, it was too much. Her blood pressure spiked. She's in intensive care now." Olumide felt his legs give out. He sank onto his expensive Italian sofa. Will she? "I don't know." Tun's voice was cold. "The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical. I'm here with her, alone, because her other son is too busy protecting his image to be here when she might be dying." "Which hospital?" "Why, so you can send money again. She doesn't need your money, brother. She needs you. The real you. The son she raised, not this stranger you've become." "Tell me which hospital, Tund, please." There was a long pause. "Lagos General, ICU ward. But Olumide, if you come here with your designer suit and your shame and your excuses, if you come here thinking you can fix this with money or apologies or tears, you can stay away. Mama deserves a son who's here because he loves her, not because he's trying to clean up his mess." The line went dead. Olumide sat in his penthouse as the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. His phone buzzed with messages, business partners asking about rumors spreading through Lagos's elite circles, friends asking if it was true about his mother, competitors probably celebrating his fall from grace. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened his photo gallery and scrolled back through years of pictures. There were hundreds of photos from the past 2 years, him at business events, at exclusive parties with politicians and celebrities and other wealthy people. But the further back he went, the more he saw her, his mother, at his university graduation, beaming with pride in her faded wrapper, at his first business success, looking tiny beside him but glowing with joy. At his birthday parties, when they'd had nothing, but managed to celebrate with jollof rice and soft drinks. In every photo, she was smiling, not the polite smile of obligation, but the deep, genuine smile of a mother who loved her son with everything she had. And he'd thrown it all away because he was ashamed. Olumide stood, grabbed his car keys, and headed for the door. But as he reached for the handle, he caught his reflection in the mirror. The expensive suit, the Rolex watch, the perfectly styled hair, he looked successful, powerful, important. But behind his eyes, he saw a stranger, someone he didn't recognize, someone he wasn't sure he even liked. His phone buzzed again. A message from his company's PR team. "Sir, rumors are spreading about your background. Suggest we get ahead of this with a statement, perhaps emphasizing your self-made success story." A self-made success story, as if he'd built everything alone. As if his mother's sacrifices, her tears, her empty stomach so he could eat, her sleepless nights worrying about school fees, as if none of that counted. Olumide deleted the message. Then he did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He fell to his knees in his luxury penthouse and he prayed. Not the quick, perfunctory prayers he muttered before business meetings, but real prayer. Desperate prayer. "God, if you're listening, please don't take her from me. Not before I can tell her I'm sorry. Not before I can show her that the son she raised is still in here somewhere, buried under all this stupidity. Please." Outside, Lagos continued its chaotic dance. Traffic, noise, millions of people chasing their own dreams and demons. Inside his penthouse, Olumide Bankole, billionaire, entrepreneur, society's golden boy, wept like the child he'd once been, the one who used to fall asleep in his mother's arms, secure in the knowledge that no matter how hard life got, she would always be there. He'd taken that love for granted. And now, in a hospital across town, the woman who'd loved him unconditionally was fighting for her life while he sat in his palace of shame. The question was, would he find the courage to face her before it was too late? Is it too late for Olumide to make things right with his mother? Will Mama Olumide survive this crisis? Should Zainab give him another chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This story is hitting different, isn't it? If you're feeling all the emotions, hit that like button and subscribe for the final chapters. Where are you watching from? Let us know. And don't forget to turn on notifications. The next chapter will determine Mama Olumide's fate. Lagos General Hospital's intensive care unit was a world away from the gleaming private hospitals where people like the Okonkwo's received their medical care. The walls were a tired shade of yellow, the floor tiles cracked in places, and the air carried that distinctive hospital smell mixed with the Lagos humidity that seeped through everything. But the doctors and nurses here were warriors, fighting to save lives with limited resources and unlimited dedication. Olumide arrived at midnight, still in his business suit but looking disheveled. His tie loosened, his eyes red from crying, his carefully constructed facade completely shattered. He'd sat in his car in the hospital parking lot for an hour, gathering courage, before finally walking through those doors. Tund sat on a plastic chair outside the ICU, his head in his hands. When he looked up and saw his brother, his expression hardened. "You actually came," Tund said, but there was no warmth in his voice. "How is she?" Olumide's voice was hoarse. "Critical but stable. They managed to bring her blood pressure down, but the doctor said the stress caused some minor heart complications. They're monitoring her." Tund stood, facing his older brother. "You know what she said when she woke up briefly? She asked if you were here. And when I said no, she just closed her eyes and said, 'It's okay. He has his own life now.'" The words cut deeper than any accusation could have. "I need to see her. Visiting hours are over. ICU patients can only have one visitor at a time, and only for 15 minutes. I already used my slot." "Tund, please." "Please what?" Tund's voice rose, anger finally breaking through. "Please help you ease your guilt. Please make this easier for you. Where was please when Mama was carrying firewood? Where was please when she was collapsing on the roadside? Where was please when she couldn't afford her medication and was too proud to beg you for help?" Other people in the waiting area were starring now, but Olumide didn't care. He deserved every word. "You're right," Olumide said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I failed her. I failed both of you. I was so busy trying to become someone I thought I should be that I forgot who I actually was." "And who are you, brother?" Tund asked, his eyes boring into Olumide's. "Are you the Olumide Bankole who used to walk Mama home from the market carrying her empty baskets? The one who promised you'd take care of her forever? Or are you the billionaire who drives past his own mother when she's suffering?" Before Olumide could answer, a nurse emerged from the ICU. "Family of Mrs. Bankole." Both brothers turned. "Yes. She's asking for both of you. Doctor says she's agitated and her blood pressure is rising again. He thinks seeing her sons might calm her down." The nurse looked at them sternly. "But you cannot upset her. Any stress could be dangerous right now. Do you understand?" They nodded and followed her through the ICU doors. Mama Olumide lay in a narrow bed, tubes and wires connecting her to various machines that beeped rhythmically. She looked so small, so fragile, like a strong wind might blow her away. Her eyes were closed, but when she heard footsteps, they fluttered open. "Tund," her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "I'm here, Mama." Tund rushed to her side, taking her hand. Then her eyes found Olumide, standing frozen at the foot of her bed. For a long moment, mother and son just stared at each other across the space that had grown between them, a space measured not in meters, but in broken promises and betrayed trust. "You came," she whispered, and Olumide couldn't tell if she was surprised or disappointed. He moved closer, his legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Mama, his voice broke. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Tears began streaming down his face, all the emotions he'd been holding back for months, maybe years, finally breaking free. I was ashamed, he continued, the words pouring out now. I was ashamed of being poor, ashamed of struggling, ashamed of you. And that shame, Mama, it turned me into someone I don't recognize, someone who could drive past his own mother, someone who could forget that everything he has, everything he is, came from your sacrifices. Mama Olumide's own tears began to fall, running down her weathered cheeks into the pillow. I don't need your apology, she said softly, each word an effort. I need to know that my son is still in there, the boy I raised, the one who understood that success means nothing if you lose your humanity along the way. He is, Mama, I swear he is, I lost my way. I got caught up in this world of money and status and I forgot what really matters. Olumide knelt beside her bed, taking her other hand. It felt so thin, so fragile in his grip. I forgot that the richest man in the world is worthless if he can't honor his mother. Do you know, Mama's voice was getting stronger, fueled by emotion. Do you know what hurt the most? Not the denial, not even seeing you drive past me. It was realizing that I had failed as a mother. That somehow, despite everything I tried to teach you, I had raised a son who could be that cruel. No, Mama. Let me finish. She squeezed his hand weakly. But then today, when I went to that big house, when I faced those wealthy people and told them the truth, I realized something. I didn't fail. You failed. You forgot the lessons, but the lessons were good. They were right. And deep down, you know they were right. That's why you're here now. That's why you're crying. Because the boy I raised is still fighting to get out from under all that shame and pride. The machines beeped steadily as the three of them sat in silence, years of pain and misunderstanding hanging in the air. I went to the Okonkwo mansion, Mama continued, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Not to destroy you, Olumide, but to save you. Because the path you were on, the man you were becoming, that would have destroyed you eventually. Maybe not your bank account, but your soul. And what good is being a billionaire if you've lost your soul? Olumide laid his head on the edge of her bed, his body shaking with sobs. I almost lost you, Mama. I almost lost you because of my stupidity, my pride, my wickedness. How can you even stand to look at me? Because you're my son, Mama said simply, running her fingers weakly through his hair the way she used to when he was a child. Because no matter how far you stray, no matter how much you hurt me, you're still the baby I carried for 9 months, the child I would die for. That doesn't change, Olumide. A mother's love doesn't change. Tund stood on the other side of the bed, watching his brother fall apart, watching his mother comfort the son who'd abandoned her. Part of him wanted to stay angry, to push Olumide away, to make him suffer more. But seeing them like this, seeing the genuine remorse in Olumide's tears, the unwavering love in their mother's eyes, he felt his own anger beginning to soften. What happens now? Tund asked quietly. How do we move forward from this? Mama looked at both her sons, her eyes moving between them. We heal, as a family, not by forgetting what happened, but by learning from it. Olumide needs to rebuild himself from the inside out. He needs to remember who he is and decide who he wants to be. I want to be your son again, Olumide said, lifting his head. Not the fake version I've been pretending to be, the real me, the one you raised. Then prove it, Mama said, her voice firm despite her weakness. Not with money, not with apologies, but with actions, with time, with presence. Show me that the boy I raised is still in there. A doctor entered, checking the monitors. Mrs. Bankole, your blood pressure is coming down nicely. This family reunion seems to be good medicine. He smiled gently. But you still need rest. These young men need to let you sleep now. As Tund and Olumide prepared to leave, Mama called out weakly, Olumide. He turned back. That girl Zainab, she's good for you. She saw your shame and called it out. That takes courage. If she's willing to give you another chance, and I'm not saying she should, but if she is, don't waste it. Don't ever lie to her again. Don't ever be ashamed of where you came from again. Because your past, our poverty, our struggles, that's not something to hide. That's your foundation. That's your strength. Olumide nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Outside the ICU, the brothers walked in silence toward the hospital exit. The night air was cool, and Lagos hummed around them with its endless energy. "She's going to recover," Tund said finally. "The doctor told me earlier, she's strong, stronger than both of us combined." "I know." Olumide stopped walking, turning to face his younger brother. "Tund, I owe you an apology too. I abandoned you just like I abandoned her. You've been carrying this family alone while I played big man in my penthouse." "You did," Tund agreed, not sugarcoating it. "And it hurt. It hurt watching you forget us, watching you change into someone I didn't recognize." "How do I make it right?" "You start by showing up, consistently. Not just when there's a crisis, but every day. You show up for Mama's doctor appointments. You show up for Sunday dinners. You show up for the small, boring, unglamorous moments that make up real family life." Tund's voice softened slightly. "And brother, you stop being ashamed. You own your story, all of it. The poverty, the struggle, the hawking in traffic, all of it. Because that story is what makes your success meaningful." They stood in the hospital parking lot, two brothers who'd grown up with nothing and had taken very different paths to navigate that trauma. One had stayed humble, the other had let success corrupt him. But now, maybe, they could find their way back to each other. "I'm moving Mama out of that room in Mushin," Olumide said. "I'm bringing her to live with me in the penthouse. She won't want to be a burden. Then I'll sell the penthouse and buy something smaller that feels like a home instead of a showroom, whatever it takes." Olumide's voice was firm, decided. "And I'm going back to the Okonkwo family, not to beg for the engagement back, but to tell them the whole truth. No more lies, no more shame. If Zainab can love the real me, the one who comes from poverty and struggle, then maybe we have a chance. If not," he shrugged, "then at least I'll have my integrity back." Tund studied his brother's face in the dim light from the hospital entrance. "You mean that? You're really ready to change?" "I have to be," Olumide said quietly, "because I saw my mother dying in there, and I realized that when I'm on my own deathbed someday, I don't want to be surrounded by money and business associates. I want to be surrounded by family, by people who love me for who I am, not what I have. And the only way to have that is to start being worthy of it now." Above them, the Lagos sky was dark, but on the horizon, the first hints of dawn were beginning to break. A new day coming, a chance to start again. Inside the ICU, Mama Olumide lay in her hospital bed, her eyes closed but her lips curved in a small smile. She'd seen the remorse in her son's eyes, heard the genuine pain in his voice. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt hope. Her son had come home, not to the physical home, but to himself, to the values she'd raised him with, to the understanding that family, love, and integrity mattered more than all the money in Lagos. It was a start, and sometimes a start was all you needed. Will Olumide truly change, or will old habits return? Can Zainab forgive him? What will Lagos society say when the truth comes out? Drop your predictions in the comments. If this chapter touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe. We're almost at the end of this incredible journey. Where are you watching from? Let us know below. Don't forget to hit that notification bell for the final chapter. 3 months had passed since that night in the hospital. Mama Olumide now lived in a modest 3-bedroom apartment in Surulere, a place she'd chosen herself, with neighbors who greeted each other, where she could walk to the market, where life felt real. Olumide visited every Sunday without fail, sitting in her small kitchen eating her cooking, relearning the lessons he'd forgotten. He'd sold the penthouse, the designer furniture, the marble floors, all gone. He'd moved into a comfortable apartment in Aikja, close to his mother. The Rolex replaced with a simple Seiko. The fleet of luxury cars reduced to one reliable vehicle. But the biggest change was internal. On this Sunday morning, Olumide stood outside the Okonkwo mansion again. But this time, he wasn't here to make excuses. He was here to face the truth. Mrs. Okonkwo answered the door, her expression guarded. "Olumide." "Good morning, Ma. I know I have no right to ask, but I was hoping I could speak with you and Zainab. I have things I need to say." She studied him, taking in the changes. Simpler clothes, humbler demeanor, something in his eyes that looked like genuine peace. "Wait here." Minutes later, she returned with Mr. Okonkwo and Zainab. The younger woman looked different, too, less makeup, simpler attire, her eyes holding wariness. "Thank you for seeing me," Olumide began. "I've spent the last 3 months learning to be honest with myself, with my family, and now with you." He pulled out a folded paper. "This is a letter, the full story of my life, where I came from, what my mother sacrificed, how I betrayed her. I'm publishing it in the newspapers next week. I want Lagos to know the truth." Mr. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. "You're committing social suicide." "Or maybe I'm committing to living authentically. I'd rather be respected for who I truly am than admired for who I'm pretending to be." Zainab spoke, her voice soft but firm. "What about your business, your investors?" "Some left when word got out. I lost 3 major contracts." Olumide smiled genuinely. "And I slept better those nights than I had in years, because I wasn't carrying the weight of pretending anymore." Mrs. Okonkwo's expression softened. "How is your mother?" "Strong as ever. Living in Surulere now, near the market where she used to hawk ground nuts. Every Sunday, she cooks for me and Tund. Last week, she made the same jollof rice we ate when we were poor, and it tasted like the best meal I'd ever had." "Because it was made with love," Mrs. Okonkwo said quietly. Zainab stepped forward. "Why are you here, Olumide? Really?" "I'm not here to ask for the engagement back. I'm here because you deserved better than the lies I told you. You deserved the truth from the beginning." He turned to Zainab. "You asked me once what kind of man I wanted to be. Now I know. I want to be the kind of man my mother can be proud of. The kind who honors his past instead of hiding from it." Tears welled in Zainab's eyes. "You broke my heart, Olumide." "I know, and I'm sorry. You deserved better. You deserved honesty, a man who wasn't ashamed of where he came from, who understood that love built on lies isn't love at all." "Mr." Okonkwo cleared his throat. "You've changed. The question is this permanent or another performance?" "Time will tell, sir. Trust has to be earned, and I haven't earned yours." Finally, Zainab spoke. "I need time. I need to see that this is real." "I understand. Take all the time you need." Olumide pulled out the engagement ring. "This is yours. You were brave enough to walk away when I gave you reasons to." She looked at the ring but didn't take it. "Keep it. If someday we find our way back to each other, you can give it to me again. But it would mean something different then. A symbol of real love built on real honesty." Mr. Okonkwo extended his hand. "I respect what you're doing. Publishing that letter, that takes real courage." As Olumide turned to leave, Zainab called out, "Bring your mother to lunch next Sunday. I want to meet her properly. I want to hear her stories." Olumide's eyes filled with tears. "She'd like that, thank you." The following Sunday, Mama Olumide arrived wearing her traditional wrapper and blouse. The household staff found themselves drawn to her warmth, her genuine smile. She helped clear plates, insisted on seeing the kitchen, treated everyone with respect. At lunch, she shared stories that made everyone laugh and cry. Stories of young Olumide studying by candlelight, of promises he'd made as a child. "He forgot those promises for a while," Mama said, looking at her son. "But the foundation remains. Sometimes all it takes is a crisis to remind them of who they really are." Zainab said quietly, "When you came here that first time, I felt betrayed. But now I understand. You showed me who Olumide really was before I made a lifelong commitment." "And what do you think now?" Mama asked gently. Zainab looked at Olumide. "I'm seeing him clearly for the first time, and I like what I'm seeing. The son who visits his mother every Sunday. The man brave enough to publish his truth even when it costs him." Olumide reached for her hand. "I can't promise perfection, but I can promise honesty. I'll never be ashamed of where I came from again." 1 year later, Olumide stood at the Okonkwo mansion in traditional attire. His mother stood beside him, resplendent in lace. Tund stood as his best man. Zainab emerged, stunning with genuine joy radiating from her face. As they exchanged vows, Olumide looked at the gathered crowd. a mix unlike any Lagos wedding had seen. Wealthy magnates sat beside market women, officials beside neighbors from Surulere. I, Olumide Bankole, son of Mama Bankole, born in poverty but raised in love, promised to always be honest, to never be ashamed of where I came from, to honor the people who made me. Later, Mama Olumide spoke to the crowd. Poverty doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do when you realize you've lost your way. Do you keep pretending? Or do you have the courage to find yourself again? She looked at Zainab. This girl chose truth over ease. She chose the real Olumide over the fake one. That makes her worthy of being called my daughter. As the celebration continued, Olumide stood with his mother under the stars. I'm proud of you, Mama said simply. My greatest fear, she continued, was that you'd lose yourself so completely that you'd never find your way back. You held up a mirror, Olumide said. I chose to look. 5 years later, Olumide's company had transformed. His office walls were covered with photographs of Mama at every stage of his life, reminders of where he'd come from. Every Sunday, his family gathered at Mama's house. Their children knew their grandmother's stories by heart, stories that taught them success meant nothing without character. As they arrived one Sunday, Zainab said, My father asked if I ever regretted giving you a second chance. What did you say? I told him I'd rather be married to a man who knows the price of redemption than one who's never needed it. Watching his mother greet their children, Olumide realized this was true wealth. Not money, but love, truth, and family. Some lessons cost everything to learn, but they change you forever. What did you think of Olumide's journey? Drop your thoughts below. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Stories by AJIBS and share. Where are you watching from? Hit that notification bell. Remember, your past is not your prison, it's your foundation. Never be ashamed of where you came from. God bless you all.